Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People. In today's episode, deadbeat brother crashed my Crown Victoria. Gets a night in jail he won't forget. Called racist Karen because we didn't give in to entitled neighbors. Entitled person wants dad's overhead bin for himself. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Deadbeat brother crashed my Crown Victoria. Gets a night in jail he won't forget. I 21M have an older brother Dave, fake name, that has always been a jerk to me. There's only a 1-year gap between us. But he liked to beat me up when we were kids, and he always acted like anything that was mine was also his. He was also somewhat the golden child, which made me miserable. So no surprise I moved out at 18. My uncle is a now retired police officer, and he took me in after I left home. He even hooked me up with a decommissioned Crown Vic. I absolutely love that car. I don't know why, but Dave hated the fact I had that car. He drove 3 beater cars into the ground while my Crown Vic kept chugging along. Well, after his 3rd beater finally died when he drove it into a pole, he asked to borrow my car. I had a bad feeling and said I wasn't gonna do that. He called me entitled and said he needed a car to get to work. I told him to take the bus because I know how he drives and my Crown Vic was off limits. My parents called me after that and told me to just lend him my car. I said I won't no matter what they say. I rely on the car and need it as well since it's my personal transportation. Dave wasn't the only one in the world with a job he needed to get to. My uncle congratulated me for standing up to them and gave me a high five. A few days later, when I got off work, the car wasn't where I parked it. I called my brother's cell, but he didn't pick up. Then I called my parents and asked them if he took my car. They denied it. So I said I was gonna call the cops, and then they admitted he'd borrowed it because he needed it. I told them he better bring it back right now or I'll have police looking for him. They called me a jerk and then phoned Dave to bring my car back. He showed back up in the parking lot in my car 20 minutes later. I demanded to know how he stole my car, and he held up a set of police Crown Vic keys he'd bought online. Some were made universal. I told him if he ever stole my car again, I'd have him arrested. Then he had the audacity to ask for a ride home. I told him he made me wait in the December cold after stealing my car so he could walk. He called me a jack and dollar before I drove away. After that, my uncle installed a tracking device in the car. When Christmas Day came, I was celebrating with family like every year. The roads were cold and icy, so I had to be very careful while driving. By now you're probably clued in on the title. Yeah, Dave borrowed my car again during the Christmas party. Apparently he decided he was gonna go pick up a friend and figured I wouldn't notice. But I did when I looked out the front window and saw my car was missing. I pulled up the tracking app and saw he was a few miles away. Then called his cell to yell at him. Everyone in the party saw this and asked what was going on. I said Dave stole my car again. And my uncle confirmed it wasn't the first time. Dave told me over the phone to screw off and he'd be back soon. I said he better not have been drinking. But he just hung up on me. Well, while I was watching the tracker app, the dot stopped and didn't move for a while. Soon we got a panicked call from Dave asking for help. He'd crashed the car because he couldn't handle the icy roads and he wasn't used to a rear-wheel drive vehicle. So we piled in my parents' minivan and followed the tracker. We found Dave by the road and my Crown Vic nose deep in a snow-filled ditch. My uncle was furious as it was formerly a car of his department. And I was mad as hell at Dave for stealing my car again. My parents wanted me to let it go. But I said enough was enough and was gonna call police. Dave begged me not to because he really had been drinking before he set off and would get a DUI. I said he was gonna pay me back for my car then or I'd sue him. Well, as luck would have it, police were already aware of the accident and were driving in to check on the scene. Someone else had called them, I guess. My parents tried to say that I was the one driving the car and they were just there to help me. I said that wasn't true, and my uncle backed me up. In fact, one of the cops that was there recognized my uncle and they had a chat. Then they went to Dave and asked to see his license, which I then found out was suspended after he'd crashed his previous car. Then they breath tested him. He wound up with cuffs slapped in his wrists while my mother was crying and begging the police not to take him away. But the officer just said that she and my dad could get arrested too for lying to police. That shut my parents up. And we got back in the minivan. The Christmas party was ended early and my parents drove me and my uncle home since he rode with me. They didn't say much to either of us the whole drive, and just sped away as soon as we were out of their van. They nearly slipped off the road themselves doing that. My brother was let out of jail the next day. And he looked so scared that he was practically crying. The cops there had roughed him up a bit while talking about prison and the $N% they'd seen go on there. Dave had actually pissed himself during that and they let him take a shower. That's when my uncle started cracking up and revealed to us that his friends in the department never filed the DUI and just the charge for the suspended license, which was about a $600 fine. My uncle said he just wanted to teach Dave a lesson. And this would be the one and only time he'd ever get his help. Dave then apologized to me and said he'd pay to have my Crown Vic fixed and would never touch it again. When it got pulled out of the ditch, the front end damage was actually minor. It needs a new front bumper, a headlight, and a grille. The damage was just superficial, thankfully. My parents have pretty much glossed over the whole incident and act like it didn't happen. Dave gave me the extra Crown Vic keys he'd bought online and said this has taught him a lesson he won't soon forget. Edit, okay guys. I'm kinda tired of so many griping about how my uncle broke the law by keeping my brother's DUI from ever being filed. I did not consent to that. I did not want him to do it. But by the time I found out, it was already done. My uncle isn't a bad person. He was actually a great cop that believed in people getting second chances. And he was thanked for that many times. Last year I saw a random man recognize my uncle and thank him for putting him on the straight and narrow some years ago. My uncle also detests racism, as do I. I won't deny the cover-up of the DUI by the department was wrong. And I have no idea how they did it. But it's already done. I no longer care about that. My brother willingly paid in full for the repairs to my car. And he's keeping out of trouble. I know he could have hurt or killed someone. That much is obvious. But he didn't. My parents should have been arrested for lying to police too. But they weren't. But my father was arrested later anyway because he attacked a man after being called out as a narcissist. And now that situation is what is currently going on. What happened with my brother is basically done now. My father trying to cave a man's face in, I'd say, is far more important at the moment than something that happened weeks ago. I've already heard it all in the comments about police corruption, needing to get my car rekeyed or have the locks changed, or several other measures. I plan to have the locks changed or rekeyed when I can afford it. But I currently can't afford it. So in the meantime I'm getting a kill switch and a steering wheel club. I hope he has learned a lesson, since your parents didn't teach him anything about responsibility. My brother has always learned lessons the hard way. They didn't always stick. But none of them scared him so much he pissed himself. I think he'll stay far away from my car now. Might not stop him from trying to take other things I own in the future though. Your parents should be charged with aiding and abetting grand theft auto since they were more concerned with trying to keep their golden child out of jail or prison. If it ever happens again, I'll aim for something like that. At this point I've made it clear I'll have no problem throwing the book at any of them if they do anything like that again. And my uncle agrees. Sounds like you have a lot more stories to tell about your brother and your parents. They were infuriating just from the story alone. I can't imagine growing up with these people. I'm glad you have your uncle though. I can't believe your parents were so quick to try to throw you under the bus for your brother. I'm glad your brother learned his lesson, but I just don't think your parents will ever be the parents you need or deserve. Thank goodness you have an uncle that cares so much. Called racist Karen because we didn't give in to entitled neighbors. They finally moved out, but it just blows my mind thinking back on just how entitled these people were. We bought a house with a shared driveway and for 2 years could not get the neighbors to stop blocking it. For context, there's plenty of room to park without blocking, they just didn't want to pull far enough over to leave room for us to get around. We tried to be neighborly and start by asking nicely for them move so we could leave. Over the 2 years, that escalated to leaving a note asking them to stop blocking, to putting up a sign, to contacting their landlord, even going as far as widening our side of the driveway in an attempt to get around. They still blocked. They were so childish about this whole thing, wouldn't address us but would go around telling their friends and other neighbors, the ones that don't know us because all the ones we know don't like them either, that we're Karens, they can't use the driveway because of us. They said that we make it a big deal, they're not blocking, they were just getting dropped off and we weren't even trying to leave anyways. Except they weren't just getting dropped off, they would block it for hours, up to 3 cars deep at times. We had to honk to get in on multiple occasions. All we asked was for them to stop parking in the middle and pull off to their own side. We do the same thing, it's not like we're asking them to do something special. They even have more parking spots on their side than we do. A lot of the time they'd be too lazy to even pull into the driveway and would just park on the street blocking it. Keep in mind, actual parking spots were available both to the left and right of the driveway. I also didn't care if they blocked it to do a quick drop-off/pickup or if they genuinely had a reason to block it, services/utilities/moving, but they rarely did. It was like rules that applied to us didn't apply to them. We couldn't ask them to stop blocking, but they could bang on our door shouting about towing a random truck parked on the public street in front of their house because they assumed it was ours. Where was that energy when they would block the driveway and simultaneously take all the street parking in front of our house? I didn't care if they parked in front of our house, but if you're going to block the driveway, at least leave somewhere for us to park. It's also an entitled parent situation too. They said we called the cops on their kids because a ball rolled into our yard and we're just prejudice. They did not watch their kids and did not care what they did. Kids would be running all through our front and backyard, around our garage and vehicles, and even up onto our porch. We came home to a whole group of kids leaning on my husband's car, and when he knocked on the door to talk to the parents, heard them, but they didn't answer the door. Kids would straight up throw rocks at our house and vehicles. 2 unsupervised 4-year-olds were in our yard moving the landscaping rocks onto the sidewalk. The 2 teen boys would pull up chairs behind our garage, and when we moved them away they had the audacity to move them back. Kids would throw trash into our yard and then spitefully did it again after we reported them. Kids would have loud, literally yelling, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. basketball games in the street that would keep me up on top of the loud music we already had to deal with. I got called racist when I finally made a noise complaint after it happened multiple nights in a row. Then I still had to make more complaints after because they continued doing it. Oh, they're just kids. Yeah, kids will be kids, but at some point you actually have to parent them. If something happens frequently enough to be a nuisance, I'm going to do something about it regardless of race. I reported a white neighbor for their dog always running loose. They stopped, so guess what, I stopped too. I'm not trying to have a personal problem, I'm trying to solve a problem. I gave them over a year before I got fed up and started calling non-emergency. I don't exactly get how that comes off as racist, Karen. Sorry for asking this, but since you raised the issue of race, and it wasn't specified in the post, I assume that you, OP, are white and the former neighbors were not? Anyway, good riddance. As someone who isn't white myself, I hate it when entitled people use the racism card as a carte blanche excuse to be douchebags. Yes, we're white and they're black. Sorry, forgot to include that. JFC. Just reading this my blood started to boil. I'm so sorry you had to go through this shit. I have nothing else to offer but my sympathies and congratulations that they're gone. I really hope you can enjoy your home now. Time for a neighborhood party, methinks. I might have been tempted to invest in some concrete bollards right inside my property line. I did invest in a large rock right on the corner of my lawn so people couldn't pull U-turns, chew up the grass, and knock my mailbox down. Entitled person wants dad's overhead bin for himself. This is actually my dad's story, and it happened in the 80s. Dad used to travel frequently for work. On one trip, he boarded his flight, placed his briefcase in the overhead compartment, and took his seat while the rest of the passengers boarded and got settled. While he was sitting there, a guy, entitled asshole, aka, came back to Dad's row, pulled Dad's briefcase out of the overhead bin, and asked Dad if it was his. Dad said yes and accepted it when the guy handed it to him, thinking that EA was going to make some room for his own carry-on and then put Dad's briefcase back. Instead, the EA put his carry-on in the overhead, leaving no room for anything else, and then walked back to his seat near the front of the plane and sat down. Rather than causing a scene, Dad removed the guy's carry-on from the overhead, put his briefcase back, and hit the flight attendant call button. When the attendant came by to check on him, he asked to gate check his carry-on. Gate-checked items are put down in the cargo hold with the rest of the checked baggage and need to be retrieved at baggage claim. He put the gate-check ticket in the seat pocket in front of him and enjoyed his flight. Dad had already deplaned by the time EA came back to get his carry-on and realized it was missing. I'm sure he found it eventually. I doubt TSA would look kindly on this kind of petty revenge these days, but it was a different time. Edit, to people thinking that he should have put his briefcase under the seat in front of him, this was 40 years ago. People were more likely to check bags back then, and it wasn't typical for people to have a large carry-on and a personal item that allowed them to avoid checking bags. People weren't expected to put their belongings on the floor. The etiquette was different. Stay classy, stay petty. So masterful. So beautiful. I cry. That was quick thinking on your dad's part. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.